guys, it's Cece, and today I'm going to be talking about all of the books that I read over the entire summer. And by all, I mean four. 4 books this summer. So let's talk about them. So I have not been doing wrap-ups, which I'm sure is a thing that some people have noticed. I've not been doing wrap-ups. The last time I did a wrap-up was at the end of May. I didn't do one for June, I didn't do one for July, and I'm counting this as a wrap-up for August, even though we're halfway through September. I really needed to do this now before I kept letting it snowball, and I just never filmed a wrap-up again. Because I actually do really like filming wrap-ups. Like, I honestly like reviewing books that I've read recently in this format. Usually, it's comforting. It's just not as comforting when I go a whole month, say the whole month of July, without reading a single book. So like I said, 4 books to cover. That is what I have to cover. I read 3 books back in June, and I read 1 book in August, and I'm going to talk about them from the one I liked least to the one I liked most, though something to be said for all of these books is that I liked all 4 of them, like to varying degrees, but I did enjoy all of them. Before we get into it, one life updatey piece of news. This seems like the best possible format to do this that will reach the most possible people, and I currently still don't really want to talk about this a ton, so I want to get this as out of the way as possible for now. The reason not as much reading happened this summer is that in July, Janelle and I broke up, and in July I didn't do a ton of reading, I didn't do a ton of anything. So that is what happened to that. The rest of it is just that my reading has been slower this year. So I don't really want to talk about this too much online. Perhaps I will eventually, but right now, I'm still kind of in the zone where I don't want to ruminate on it too much, don't really want to dig through that mess. But my relationship has been a part of my channel for a number of years, so I needed to form some kind of update. This is it for now. Okay, let's talk about books now. Let's move firmly into the book territory. Okay, first book that I want to talk about is Long Macchiatos and Monsters by Alison Evans. This is a pretty quick novella. I think it's under 100 pages, and it has a genderqueer main character who is falling for a trans dude. They bond over coffee and terrible sci-fi movies, and it's a very quick novella, so that's kind of the only summary I want to give you. This is delightful in a lot of ways. I mean, trans folks just falling in love is a great subject for a novella, in my opinion. It's comforting, it's soft, the characters are really likable, and of course, I also am a fan of bad sci-fi. Perhaps not as big a fan in any way as the 2 characters in this story are, but certainly I've loved bad sci-fi for most of my life. Honestly, the reason I read this novella originally is because a lot of my trans reviewer friends, they really liked this novella, and I wanted to give it a shot, and I understand why so many people have found it and really appreciated it. It's adorable, it's nice, it's romance, and it's cheesy, and I highly recommend it. I personally gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars. I thought it was really delightful, and I read this on the final day of Pride, which felt like the perfect way to close out that month. Next up, I want to talk about Hullmetal Girls by Emily Skrutsie. This is a fairly new release. I had an arc of it, and when I read it, the book hadn't been released yet, so I get a little bit ahead of the game on that one. This book is set in the future in a space fleet, and it is about something called Skella or Sella. They are genetically engineered super soldiers. So there are 2 main characters, 2 girls, each of whom at the beginning of the novel we discover have decided to become Skella. One of them makes this decision as a way to get government funding to hopefully save her family, and the other can't remember making this decision at all. She grew up in a life of luxury, and she can't imagine why a privileged girl like herself would have made the decision to become mostly machine. Emily Skrutsie is becoming my go-to person for getting into genres and types of stories that I don't particularly see in YA, especially in queer YA. She also wrote The Abyss Surrounds Us, which was about queer lady pirates, and it was great. This is about queer lady super soldiers who, basically, it's an enemies to best friends scenario. That's kind of the storyline with the 2 main characters here. One of them is Arrow Ace, and they are both women of color. There's also trans side rep, pan side rep. It's just like, the rep is fantastic, but it's also an incredibly exciting book that very deeply deals with bodily autonomy and consent in a way that can be difficult to read about, but that is handled so incredibly well. I would look up some reviews for this book. Some Ace reviewers have found the way that the character reveals she use Aro Ace to be invasive or harmful. Some Ace reviewers have not agreed with this, but it is something that if you are Ace and you were worried about being triggered, I would perhaps consider looking into that just to determine if the scene is going to be triggering to you. I personally found so many of the conversations in this book fantastic and interesting, and I thought that scene connected back really well to the themes of bodily autonomy and consent that were throughout this entire novel. No one really has a moment where they are in control of their own destiny or even their own bodies, and that's scary and horrifying, but Emily Skrutsie handles it beautifully and creates these characters that are fierce and occasionally deeply unlikable, but in the most wonderful way, and I really loved this book. I highly recommend it, and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. I cannot wait for Emily Skrutsie to keep writing weird queer girls in sci-fi. It's thrilling. Moving on, I want to discuss Anger is a Gift by Mark Oshiro. This is also a new release. This came out at the tail end of May, and what a debut. What a debut. So this is about a young boy named Moss who attends a school in Oakland, California. A few years before the beginning of the story, his father was killed by the police, and Moss still suffers frequent panic attacks remembering this part of his life. More recently, he finds himself being tied more and more in with this group of friends who are trying to fight against the way that their Oakland high school is treating them, in the way that it's treating them more and more like prisoners instead of students. This book had a slow start, in my opinion. It took a little bit to get going. I think that some of the dialogue is a little bit stilted and some of the character introductions are a little bit stilted. So when I started reading this book, I had no idea the emotional impact it would have on me or how incredibly well written the second half is. This is a book about systematic racism, and it doesn't have any easy answers. It is brutally honest and incredibly difficult to read at most times. I read the entire second half of this all in one go and spent most of that time sobbing. It's just a hard-hitting book that I didn't expect to hit in those ways. This one does also have some trigger warnings. Moss's panic attacks are very intimately described and you are in his own head, and that can be very difficult to read. There are also some other trigger warnings that have some more spoilery elements, so I will try to link to some reviews down below that discuss those elements more. One of the most beautiful aspects of this book is the incredibly diverse cast. The main character, Moss, is black and gay, and his entire friend group is queer, and they're all people of color. There's a hijabi side character, there is a disabled side character, there are characters that identify as lesbian, bi, gay, trans, ace. It's just an incredibly constructed cast of people that you can't help but love, and an incredibly constructed cast of people who you believe are going to stand up and fight for their own personhood, which is one of the most difficult and all-consuming fights that so many people have to fight every single day. This is an absolutely brilliant book, an absolutely brilliant debut. It is incredibly relevant and necessary, and I cannot wait to see what Mark Oshiro does next, and I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars. Also, be sure to check out the video that I did with Mark Oshiro back in June. It's just a cute little video where you can learn more about him, and he's a really, really great guy, and he makes me really happy, which is good because his book devastated me. And the final book that I'm going to talk about is the 5th season by N.K. Jemisin. This is the one book that I managed to read in August, and that is because I'd already read half of it through 2 other months. I've been reading slow, guys. I wish more than anything that I could have given this book the appreciation it deserves. Like, I still gave it 4.5 stars. It was a brilliant book, but I feel like if I had been in a different presence of mind where I was actually, you know, motivated, wasn't sad all the time, I would have gotten through this a lot faster, and it easily would have been a 5-star read to me. So just give me time to reread this, and then that's gonna happen. This is sort of a difficult plot to describe, in my opinion. It opens by saying that this is the way the world ends for the last time, and like the hook of this novel, the first 2 chapters, you're like, what? Like, it's charming, it's incredibly different, it pulls you in, it is one of the most engaging opening parts of a book I've ever read. You're following a few different perspectives throughout the book, which is where it gets more complicated to describe, I would say. One of my favorite aspects is that there is a whole storyline that is written in second person, and that is basically because the main character is dissociating for most of the book. She just has to kind of create a distance between herself and the world due to a traumatic event that opens the novel. I'm not usually one for second person narratives, but it was handled so brilliantly that I just absolutely loved that. The story about Cyanite is my favorite storyline. I think it's the most compelling, but like, every single storyline gets there in terms of being incredibly compelling and being full of characters that are fascinating, and this book is absolutely brilliant. There were so many times when stuff would happen that I would just, like, my jaw would drop. I think one of my updates on Goodreads is just me yelling, "What? What?" But mostly this is a book about oppression and personhood that feels like it was a theme for these books. Oppression, personhood, autonomy, it's been a theme. And the way that it is approached in this book is one of the most brilliant things I've ever had the pleasure of reading. N.K. Jemisin has won the Hugo Award like 3 years running. She is an incredible author, and I cannot wait to read the rest of this series. This is the first in the Broken Earth trilogy, and like with an intro like this, I'm fascinated to see where this series goes next. So I highly recommend it. It is an incredibly in-depth and fascinating fantasy book that I adored with my whole heart. When I actually sat down and got through it, again, I got through like half of it in a couple of days, where the first half had taken me actual months because I was mopey and sad. But I wound up giving it 4.5 out of 5 stars. I can't wait to reread it, and I can't wait to read the rest of the series. Okay guys, that is it. Those are the books that I read this summer. I hope that you appreciated having a little update on my recently read books. I'm trying to get back into the swing of YouTube, especially now that I've settled into my apartment and where I'm living and the life that I'm currently leading. It has been really exciting. Other exciting YouTube things are coming down the line soon, so keep an eye out for that. Possibly an announcement coming in the next couple of weeks that I'm very, very excited for. You may already know about it, kind of, if you follow me on Twitter, possibly. Yeah, exciting things are happening, and stuff that I am excited to work on creating again, and I haven't felt excited about creating stuff in a while, so this has been a good time. What was your favorite book that you read over the summer? Let me know down in the comments below so I can get some new recommendations, get back into the swing of things. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you in another one very soon. Bye!